Good morning, it's Tuesday the 9th of January here in London. This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up today, in another blow to Boeing, United finds loose bolts on multiple 737 MAX jets.
As Antony Blinken warns of consequences for continued attacks in the Red Sea, we have a special report on the sailors risking their lives to make the crossing.
Plus, picking up the tab, taxpayers face a £10 billion bill for student loans, including those that have already been repaid.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
United Airlines says it has found loose bolts in multiple Boeing 737 MAX jets during inspections of the planes. The discovery follows a midair blowout on an Alaska Airlines flight, which prompted the Federal Aviation Administration to ground more than 170 jets. Bloomberg Intelligence's senior aerospace analyst George Ferguson has more.
When you look at the way the plug, the shots later on, and you see where the plug was and how clean the plug seemed to have left the airplane, it does seem to indicate that either fasteners failed or someone didn't apply the fasteners correctly. And I think the United news kind of confirms that maybe somebody on the manufacturing line didn't understand the right procedure for applying this plug.
That's George Ferguson from Bloomberg Intelligence. The setback comes after a series of manufacturing and quality lapses at Boeing. Its shares suffered their biggest decline in more than a year on the news, dropping by 8% in New York.
America's top diplomat says that Houthi militants will face consequences if they continue to attack ships in the Red Sea. Antony Blinken's warning comes as the US and its allies contemplate strikes on the Iran-backed group in Yemen. He told reporters that the principle of freedom of navigation is at stake.
We've had 40 countries come together to make clear that what the Houthis are doing has to stop. And we have other countries that have made clear that if it continues, there have to be consequences. So our strong view, our strong preference is that the Houthis get the message that they're receiving from countries around the world that this needs to stop, and that's what we're focused on.
Blinken meets with Israel's leader Benjamin Netanyahu later today. He is hoping to contain the conflict in Gaza and potentially broker a post-war government for the Strip.
France's Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne has resigned, prompting a government reshuffle expected to be unveiled today. Borne said that President Emmanuel Macron told her he wanted to replace her. The French leader is seeking to refresh his government agenda ahead of European elections in June. French media are reporting that Education Minister Gabriel Attal is the favourite to replace Borne as the next Prime Minister.
Samsung's profits have fallen by 35% amidst weak consumer demand in the tech industry. The company's sixth straight quarter of declining operating profit, which missed estimates by about 24%. Tom Kang, who is research director at Counterpoint Technology Market Research, says that the results indicate that the sector's revival might take longer than previously expected.
The numbers are a bit disappointing, but they are rebounding. So I think this shows that the rebound is going to be a bit slower than we all thought. So the semiconductor market has been starting to recover since the third quarter last year. Prices were rising, but it looks like the prices are not rising that fast, and the demand from certain sectors are not that strong.
Kang's comments come after Samsung executives predicted in October 2023 that the $160 billion memory market would bounce back gradually this year, driven by a boom in AI development. Investors will want to hear about Samsung's long-term investment plans when it releases full results on the 31st of January.
Barclays let go approximately 5,000 staff last year. The move is the most visible sign yet of cost-cutting at the lender. Bloomberg's Tiwa Adebayo has the details.
Barclays cut about 6% of its global headcount last year during what was described as its, quote, ongoing efficiency programme. According to a company statement, the majority of roles affected were in support functions, reflecting increased automation capacity. The bank's stock lagged behind peers in 2023 and faces slowing tailwinds from higher interest rates in the UK this year. Despite the cuts, Barclays says it will continue hiring in some business areas. In London, Tiwa Adebayo, Bloomberg Radio.
The UK Treasury is facing a yearly £10 billion hit due to its student loan scheme. It's a cost that the Institute for Fiscal Studies says is not on the books. Bloomberg's James Wilcock explains.
The think tank says the government will lose an average of £15,000 per student this year. That's because the price of financing new government borrowing is more than 3 times higher what it was 2 years ago, and will outpace students' inflation tracking interest. The IFS say the spread is not one the Office of National Statistics tracks, and is set to cost the government £10 billion annually, right at a moment when Chancellor Jeremy Hunt is hoping for fiscal headroom. In London, James Wilcock, Bloomberg Radio.
And UK Christmas shopping sales failed to deliver a festive boost for retailers. According to the latest data, the British Retail Consortium and KPMG say that total sales grew by just 1.7% in December, compared with almost 7% growth a year earlier. The difficult trading environment for retailers is expected to continue this year as shoppers see little respite from higher living costs. Ongoing weak data may also stoke concerns that the UK economy could tip into recession and raise the possibility of rate cuts by the Bank of England. Now, in a moment, we'll bring you some first-hand reporting from those sailing the world's most dangerous shipping lane. Bloomberg's Aaron Clark's going to join us for his piece about the perils for seafarers braving the Red Sea and Suez Canal as those attacks by Houthi militants have taken place over the past couple of months. But another story that caught our eye this morning, Caroline.
Yeah, do you buy branded sportswear gear? I should have asked this to Leanne Gerrans, of course, who's in the Middle East, a long-time listeners
keen
will be
sportswoman.
familiar.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. I don't know whether you do. Maybe you were influenced, if you did, by, of course, the legendary...
I'm very susceptible to influencing. Yeah.
Okay, Tiger Woods. 27 years Tiger Woods and Nike have had this iconic partnership worth $660 million. Now the golf legend, though, has announced a split. All very friendly, wishing each other well for the future and so on. But the relationship going back to 1996, really taking golf to new heights. Yeah, 96.
Hard to imagine who Tiger Woods was in 1996. I mean, comparatively to the global name that he is now. Yeah,
absolutely. 15 major titles and obviously still playing. But yes, I think the idea of whether this kind of partnership would continue has been in doubt actually for some months, but now the split sort of comes. So still lots of question marks there about what Tiger Woods might do. He does have his own clothing line, apparently. Not that I've ever seen it, but, you know, the Nike swoosh, and I think he really revolutionised, sports icons and
I mean, he was
sportswear.
signed up tonight before LeBron James, which I didn't realise. Yes. I would assume that relationship went back much longer. Anyway, yeah, fascinating news in the worlds of sports sponsorship as well.
Now, let's talk about the latest from the Middle East now. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Israel and meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This is Israel's longest-serving leader, is also facing increasing questions about his leadership after the October 7th attack and the ensuing war in Gaza. Let's bring in Israel Bureau Chief Ethan Bronner now for more on this topic. Good morning, Ethan. First of all, what is Antony Blinken hoping to achieve on this trip now? I believe his fourth. Has the tone shifted?
I'm not sure how much the tone has shifted, but certainly Blinken's goal here has been to urge the Israelis to move from a more robust form of warfare to a more targeted one. And the Israelis have said that's what they're doing at the urging of the United States. So partly it's to kind of button that down and make sure the Israelis say they're pulling 5 brigades out in the coming days and weeks. So that's part of what they want. And the goal here is to reduce civilian casualties and to reduce the risk of starvation and disease spreading in Gaza, and to start thinking in some concrete terms about the so-called day after, how Gaza is going to be run once Israel ends its military efforts to take out Hamas. So that's all of that. Now, don't forget that Blinken arrived in Israel from Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, and he comes with a very specific message, which is that the Gulf leaders are eager and willing to help rebuild Gaza, but only in the context of the agreement for a Palestinian state. The Israelis are unlikely to be willing to say those words at the moment, so we'll have to see where it goes.
What about Benjamin Netanyahu and all of this as well? How has the war with Hamas changed his leadership?
Well, first of all, it has deeply threatened it. I mean, he had sold himself, and his entire image had been as Mr. Security, as the guy who has presided over a longest sort of moment of peace and prosperity in Israel from around 2006 to October 7th. A few skirmishes, but fundamentally a great increase in GDP per capita, a huge increase in the economy and international investment in Israel, and in a sense that the place was safe and secure. That's all over, and his poll numbers are way down. In addition, of course, he's been fighting charges of corruption, fraud, bribery. So he's got that going. But there have been basically, and then there was this attempt, along with his far-right partners in government, to remake the judiciary, weaken the judiciary, which upset people and produced weekly demonstrations in the country until October 7th. So there was a lot going on to begin with, and his numbers are down. He is not the most popular leader in Israel right now. Benny Gantz is. But the system is that he doesn't have to call an election, and he may well not.
So in terms of the pressure then that he might be under from Antony Blinken, how much is Netanyahu's fate tied with what happens in Gaza? I mean, might he be forced out before the end to the war? I mean, the Israelis are talking about many, many months of war and conflict.
They are. The problem is, what does it mean to force him out? There is no real legal system to force him out. He has a 64-member Knesset majority out of 120, and as long as he holds his coalition together, there is no way to drive him from power unless he were to be convicted, and that's not going to happen quickly enough for that to happen. So the idea would be that there's this emergency war cabinet, which includes members of the opposition. If this war shifts into a more low-level operation and they decide there's no longer a need for an emergency cabinet, then we're back to the old government, and there'll probably be weekly demonstrations again calling for him to resign, and people are very angry and eager for the remaining 100+ hostages to be returned. But, there is no specific way of making him leave, and what we know about him suggests he's unlikely to go on his own.
Okay, well, a story for us to monitor then. Israel Bureau Chief Ethan Bronner, thank you very much for joining us with that.
We've been reporting in recent weeks, though, on the attacks on cargo ships travelling through the Red Sea. The strikes by militant group in Yemen have endangered civilian seafarers, raised costs along a crucial global trade artery. And of course, it's related to the war in Gaza, to tensions in the Middle East. Bloomberg's Aaron Clark has been speaking, though, to some of those aboard these ships, and he joins us now for more. Aaron, good morning. Thank you for being with us. Just remind us, why are Iran-backed Houthi militants based in Yemen attacking commercial vessels in the Red Sea?
Yeah, the Houthi militants in Yemen, they're attacking ships connected to Israel, or they've said they're attacking ships connected to Israel in order to break the siege on Gaza and stop Israeli aggression. They're demanding people in Gaza get access to things like food and medicine. Some of the initial attacks were on vessels that appeared to have a link to, Israel or Israeli ownership. Those connections have begun to look a lot more tenuous now. And just in terms of the numbers, the U.S. Central Command have said that there have been at least 24 attacks between November 19th and January 2nd. And there's still, a vessel that was hijacked and remains off the coast of Yemen. There's a 25-member crew that's effectively hostage right now.
Aaron, you spoke to seafarers whose ships have been attacked by drones. Can you describe what they experienced?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty traumatic. One seafarer I spoke with, he described how, he was on the bridge helping navigate the ship through the Red Sea. It was around midday. Most of the crew was having lunch in the dining hall, and basically, there was a loud bang, and it was very clear that there had been some sort of an attack. It didn't actually directly strike the ship. They believe it was was a drone. He said it was very windy that day, and he thinks the wind actually probably saved the ship from a direct strike, which obviously could have been catastrophic. But anyway, there was a huge bang. The captain quickly ran up from the dining room and got on the public address system and ordered most of the crew into the ship's citadel. This is basically a safe room where you can sort of barricade in the event the ship is being attacked by pirates. But the people remaining on the bridge sent out distress messages. Very quickly, a U.S. warship arrived and sort of checked them for damage, and they continued through the strait and were able to make it out safely. But, clearly it can be traumatic. And the seafarer I spoke to, I mean, he said that some other seafarers broke down in tears because it was, they could have died. So, it's can be quite traumatic and dangerous for these folks who are civilian seafarers.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.